Science.
This is Rando Science.
Yeah.
Again,
we're back. Randoscience.com.
somehow we've managed to fork out 3 episodes.
I don't know how we have that much content, honestly.
I don't know how we have that. Yeah.
I didn't think I had that capacity in my brain.
I don't. So we'll see how this one goes.
Yeah, but welcome back. If you want to support us before we get started, you can support us by donating on Anchor or donating on Patreon. We have a Patreon page.
Yeah. Or honestly, even if you have just no money, you just want to share our Instagram page.
Yeah, no, it's super helpful.
Yep.
But if you want to donate, you can go to patreon.com/randoscience.
Right.
And become a supporter. Super simple.
Yep.
So today's episode, we have Andre Hansford. Andre is a consultant at Accenture, which is a company in Atlanta. So, hi, Andre. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So let's dive right in. Andre, we sent out a question on our Instagram asking people for topics, and you responded. And the topic you wanted to talk about was publish or perish.
Yep.
In academia. So let's just dive right into it, dude.
Right into it.
Yeah. Just like,
all right. Not that I wanted to talk about it. I think that it should be discussed more broadly. But a little bit about my background. So I do have a master's degree in chemical engineering from Auburn.
Wow.
So I've done a little bit of research in graduate school, and I've seen how publish or perish really puts a lot of stress, not only onto like the graduate student, but onto the professor. If they don't feel like that they can get into a high impact journal, there's a lot of like downstream consequences that I think that they probably inflate in their own mind. So I don't think that it's worth that amount of stress. And then the major point about it is that it pushes professors to publish in journals things that don't actually contribute that much to the entire greater field of what they're trying to study. I think that they're trying to make small gains and make it into that impact journal and influence greater work, like greater pieces and greater research papers, which is great. I think that like there's value in that. But do I think that if you can't make it into the high impact journal, are you wasting money by trying to make small gains rather than going out with after what you're truly interested in? A little bit. Can I quantify that? Probably not. But I don't know. I think that it's a really sticky subject, and I think that academia needs to move away from that.
No, I couldn't agree more. So I actually have some like fairly recent experience with that, but we won't get into that.
Yeah.
So do you have personal experience with that? Like, was there a time in your academic career where you felt like you were publishing like results that are trying to publish results that you really didn't care about?
The short answer is yes. It's not that I didn't care about it. It's that I think that there has been a lot in the work that I was trying to do. We're trying to make CNC films, which is cellulose nanocrystal thin films for point of care medical devices, rather than using silicon, because it has similar properties to silicon and is made in a similar way as like a silicon chip.
Okay.
I think the research that I personally,
I was just going to say, what would that, you said point of care film. So like, what would it be used for, just for like people listening?
Yeah. So like if you have diabetes, you put your blood onto a strip, and then you put that strip into a reader, and based on certain aspects of your blood, it tells you like what you're diabetic or like that you're low in like insulin, right?
All right.
Right.
So the devices that we were trying to make were more so going into point of care sensors that could detect prostate and breast cancer by the immobilization of certain proteins onto the surface of that thin film. In the making of that work, I think that it had value. I think that what my research professor, Dr. Davis, was trying to do is really novel, and I think that she has made some novel gains. But based on the papers that I was modeling my work after, I don't think that close enough attention was paid to the overlapping aspects of this paper, right? So like some papers would say that you have to make it at a certain temperature in an oven. Others would say that you have to do it in a vacuum sealed oven. Others would say at this concentration it's best. And so like, because a lot of those papers were formed out of the way of making small gains rather than looking at larger topics or larger aspects about that topic. They had conflicting results on those small details, right? Which made following them very difficult for somebody that was trying to do something completely different, using these papers that are citing these certain methods. So I think that if professors in general focus on making larger strides in science, regardless of how long that takes. And again, you have to kind of put it away to the wayside, publish or perish, because you want to get things out quickly. I think if you don't have that time crunch and that time aspect, I think that you can make greater strides in science.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, I think like it's so hard. Like it's so hard not to get caught up in that though. I think you can just as easily get caught up in that in like industry. You know, like there's definitely.
There goes
our poster fell. I can't believe that.
Bad omen.
Oh my gosh.
Big bummer.
I don't even know how it did it. The little pin is still up there. Anyway.
Anyway.
Yeah. Smooth recovery.
Yeah.
So I was
budget.
Yeah. low budget podcast alert. Warning.
Oh man.
Anyway, in industry, I think you can just as easily sort of like get caught up in the rat race of like just doing incremental progress that your manager is telling you to do, instead of like focusing on something that you think might be, you know, really innovative or beneficial to the company, right?
Yep.
So, all right, I want to talk a little bit about. So we've talked a little bit about like publish or perish. I want to come back to that, but you have kind of an interesting like journey of how you even came to become a chemical engineer, right? So like you went to Sarah Lawrence first in New York. So like what were you studying at Sarah Lawrence?
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Sarah Lawrence is a small liberal arts college in Bronxville, New York, just outside New York City. At that school, you can study whatever you would like. We don't have general ed requirements. And because of that, everybody gets a liberal arts degree. So there's only a way to like concentrate into subjects, but there's no way to get that degree. So I primarily studied chemistry and mathematics. And then in my abroad year, I did a little bit of chemical engineering under the radar. And I loved it. I thought it was a pretty great school to like get to choose what you really want to study versus being pigeonholed and feeling like you just have to finish something.
Yeah.
I've heard people like compare it to Reed College.
Yeah, that's our sister college.
Is it really?
Yeah.
See, I didn't even know that. That's awesome. So Reed College for people listening.
How did you end up there? Are you from New York, or you just really wanted to go there? Where are you from?
Yeah, so I grew up in Charlotte, and I was doing like Northeastern college tours as one does in high school.
Right.
And we went to New York to visit some family, and then we were going to head over to Philadelphia to go to Penn. And I had a cousin who went to Sarah Lawrence, and we got dinner with her. She like wined and dined us, like showed us like the best parts of the city and all of these nice things, and would not shut that fuck up about Sarah Lawrence.
So you were seduced into Sarah Lawrence.
Oh yeah, looking back onto it, like Joy, you did a great job. So after a while, I was just like, you know what, Mom, like let's cancel the Penn trip. Like I want to check out Sarah Lawrence. Joy won't stop talking about it. It's apparently really cool. Like, and we went there the next day, and I like fell in love. I think it's like a great school, beautiful campus. All of the buildings are like stone and Tudor style.
That sounds
great.
Sounds nice.
Like, yeah. And what I also really liked about it is that everyone had a lot of thought that they put into their conversations. Like there wasn't really much like, I mean, there's like pointless, meaningless conversations everywhere. But like as a visiting student, like I didn't really exactly. But like as a visiting student, like I didn't really encounter that much. And I really liked it. And I liked
it's a lot more common as a student to have conversations with people where you're like, why are we talking about this?
Yeah. So like, do you think where do you think the balance is, right? So like, I think that there's like definitely merit to having some structure, like, and maybe like having majors and stuff like that, having some sort of focus. but I also think there's like maybe even more merit to leaving your education like self-guided, because it's going to force you to take responsibility like for your own education. So like, where in your eyes, where is the balance? Like, do you think Sarah Lawrence has the perfect balance? Do you think it needs some structure? Yeah.
I think to choose just one would probably do a disservice for everybody else whose minds think differently. So I think that we should be able to have the option of like trade schools and heavy math and science schools like MIT, but then also have these smaller colleges like Sarah Lawrence and Vassar and Wesleyan and Wellesley and all of these other like amazing, great liberal arts colleges.
Yeah.
I think that I couldn't imagine picking just one, because not everybody thinks the same way that I do. So like, who am I to force that on somebody else, right? And then the second point is like, Sarah Lawrence is the most expensive college in the U.S. So like,
I did not know that.
No way.
It's constantly ranked as that. So to have that type of education and that small of an environment, like there are only, I believe, like 1,700 students in total, and that's including graduate students. That it comes with a price, right? It really comes at a price. So like, I don't think that everybody can have that price.
Wow.
Definitely.
I can't even imagine, like 1,700.
That's wild.
That's smaller than...
That's like how many people I see walking to class.
That's smaller than the computer science department at Auburn.
It was smaller than my high school. My high school is 4,000.
That's wild.
That's like definitely the opposite experience that most people have.
There's that word again.
What?
Wild.
Oh, yeah. We were talking about vocabulary before you hopped on.
Yeah.
And Dylan's like, I say wild a lot.
I do. He's like, that's wild, bro.
So what made you interested in chemical? And maybe even more specifically, what made you interested in chemical engineering as opposed to maybe like pure chemistry?
Yeah. So between my second and third year at Sarah Lawrence, I was applying to a bunch of internships, and I ended up accepting one at Auburn for like a research experience for undergraduate program, working in therapeutics. And I ended up with Dr. Steve Duke, who is amazing. And
he's a really cool guy.
Yeah, he's the best.
Yeah.
And so working in his lab, we were trying to make micronized particles for pulmonary drug delivery out of gelatin. And we were using supercritical fluids. So it was like a really cool, like, I don't know.
So what is a supercritical fluid?
Yeah. So a supercritical fluid is a fluid that is between the phases of gas and water. So it's at such a high pressure and at such a high temperature that those gases combined, essentially, or not combined, but have like so much attraction that they don't have the space between them that a gas would. Right. So that's a supercritical fluid. And so we were using supercritical carbon dioxide. And it was just a great summer, great experience. I really enjoyed Auburn. And then so the following year, I went abroad to Oxford and decided like, I kind of want to just pursue that. I don't really know what I want to do after undergrad. Kind of want to go to grad school. I really liked chemical engineering. That was fun. Like, let me just apply to a bunch of chemical engineering, like graduate programs. And ended back up at Auburn.
Wow.
Dude.
So can you talk about like the differences between studying in the UK versus studying in the US?
Yeah, it's vastly different. I don't know essentially though that I can speak for all of studying in the UK since I only studied at Oxford. So I can speak for like the Oxford Cambridge system, but I can't really speak for like everything else.
Right.
It's heavily intense because the classes are tutorials. So you're studying usually just you one-on-one with the professor multiple times a week or once a week, depending on like however you decide to sign up your classes.
It's completely different.
So it wasn't that different for me because Sarah Lawrence is modeled after that system. So I was used to having like one-on-one time with my professors every week.
Okay.
But it's also kind of interesting because like you can't really bullshit your way through because like it's immediately apparent that you didn't do the reading.
Yeah. Whereas in the US, we're like, push them through the system.
4 years, buddy. You're getting out of here.
So I mean, and I think like some of that speaks to like the rigor of getting into the institution that you're at. But at Oxford, I was taking primarily chemistry classes, so not all of my classes were one-on-one. We did have like one organic chemistry tutorial, and then I learned um, fluid mechanics as a tutorial, so that one was with a one-on-one. But I took like an organic chemistry lab with all of the other British students. I sat in on lectures for electromagnetism and for linear algebra with all of the other British students. So like those much larger, much less like in-depth classes, like they're still kind of introductory. Those are still like taught in large lecture halls and then have like breakout sessions. But if you speak to anybody that studies like classics or like economics or like PPE or which is politics, philosophy, and economics,
The first thing that came to mind was personal protective equipment. Because of coronavirus. When you said PPE.
Wow, I'm surprised it took this long for us to mention COVID. But
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Keep going.
No, you're fine. They're studying in a more traditional tutorial sense, and so it's just a lot different. And then at the end of the year, everyone has exams all together. Everyone wears subfusk, which is like a certain dress that you have to wear in the examination halls. It's like very, very like proper at the end of the year.
Interesting.
That's cool.
That's so different.
So how has getting a master's degree impacted your work life? So you've kind of experienced both academia and industry. Do you think that do you use your master's degree? Do you think like I guess like what I'm getting at is like, did getting a master's degree really help prepare you for industry, or do you think it's more like a self-feeding system where it's going to go like master's feeds you into a PhD and then PhD feeds you into a life in academia?
Teaching. Yeah.
So speaking personally, I think that my master's degree helped me a lot. Do I use the things that I studied? Absolutely not. I'm in consulting. And I'm like doing like tech consulting. It's not chemical engineering consulting.
Really?
Okay. Yeah. I work in tech advisory and strategy. So I'm doing more back end work with like infrastructure teams and stuff for large companies.
Wow.
But I think that studying chemical engineering in general, and like who's to say that I couldn't have like picked up these skills in an undergrad, but from the amount of research and like independent thinking that you have to do, like I doubt I could. I think that it really helped me like become a better problem solver, which makes me a better consultant in general. And I think that like having so many like poster symposiums and practicing like giving your dissertation and all of these other opportunities that you have to like publicly speak, it's made me a much more fluid public speaker, if that makes any sense. I think that like I'm personally like very personable. I think I don't know. I like to shoot myself in the back or like pat myself on the back.
I mean,
brag on yourself. Wow.
He seems pretty
joking.
personable to me.
He's definitely personable. I think anybody who knows Andre knows how personable he is.
Thank you. But I think like doing all of these very intense, I don't know if it's the right word, competitive like symposiums where you really have to defend your work because like you're the one that's closest to the research that you're doing. It has a lot of motifs that are like echoed in consulting. Like we're constantly being challenged by the client, and having that background makes me a stronger consultant in my everyday life. For other people that are doing masters and PhDs, I think that there are a ton of jobs out there that require a PhD, and like you should have them. Like if you're working at Intel, you should have a PhD if you're going to be the head engineer.
Right.
But I think that there is a big feedback loop, like going back into academia. But that's to be expected, right? Like a lot of the same people that go to get MBAs go back into consulting or go back into business. So
right. Well, I think it's just kind of like you get comfortable with where you're at. A lot of people, you're just like, because you get to a college, you do a master's degree, and then they kind of like probably end up giving you some kind of offer towards a PhD, and then you take that, and then they're like, oh well, you could stay here and keep teaching and do more research, and then it's like oh well, I'm just comfortable here, so I think I'll just stay here.
I mean, I can definitely vouch for that, where it's like if you start doing undergraduate research, you know, like your research advisors will just like straight out tell you like, I want you to do a PhD with me. And it's like, if you're not like self-confident enough to say like, oh no.
I love the but
you know?
Oh no.
Yeah. Like if you don't have the backbone to be like, see, I like you, but
sorry,
you know, like, then it can be very intimidating for some people. And then they feel almost pressured, kind of like what we were talking about with publish or perish. Like there's all sorts of these pressures that are like keeping you in whichever stream that you're in. Like if you're in the industry stream,
right,
then there's all these pressures to not go back to school unless it's in the company's interest. In which case it goes back to what Andre was talking about, where it's like, all right, we're going to send you back to school to get your MBA, but then you're going to come back and, you know, help us.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, like, and just like on that point of what you were saying with like professors trying to pressure their students into doing a master's or doing higher degrees, like they don't want to lose that like student that they see a lot of potential in to a different graduate program. So that's why they're like pressuring like undergrads to like stay.
Right. Like
and it doesn't help because like you're at a really unsure part of your life. So you're like pretty vulnerable.
Yeah, it's that. And then like you really just don't have a whole lot of undergrads these days that are super interested in staying in academia.
Yeah, I think it's changing. Like, I think the landscape for academia is definitely changing, where it's like people are less and less interested in grad school.
Yeah, a lot of people are just looking for that big paycheck after 4 years.
Right.
I would argue the opposite. I think a lot of people are going to graduate school either A, because they do feel comfortable, or B, because a lot of everybody else has a graduate degree, you know? And so it's kind of like if you want to be competitive, this is the way to do it.
Yeah, I might be a little bit biased because I'm kind of like speaking from purely from like a CS software engineering sort of perspective.
Yeah, same.
And like a lot of big companies, even just within like the last 2 years, dropped the requirement to even have a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
So like you can have people with just a high school diploma basically like applying to Google and getting the job. So
doing the same line of work as people with graduate degree or like bachelors.
Yeah, or even graduate. Say even you could work up and be on the same level as somebody with a PhD.
Yeah. So I would say like, so there's definitely, from personal experience, there's definitely like a different sort of path that you take if you were to choose that. But for the most part, I think these like big tech companies are more open-minded than ever about where their talent is coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's just like, it really, it boils down to like the natural pressures of the environment that they're in, right?
Yeah.
Like to maintain a competitive edge, there's no incentive for them to limit their applicants. There's only incentive to make sure that the ones that they accept are good.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So then really what that does is puts a lot of pressure on the hiring process, not on like the application requirements.
Right.
So I think that's something that a lot of people kind of overlook. But in other fields maybe.
Well, a lot of people do, like a lot of companies now also do like term employment. So when you get hired, you have like a certain amount of time to prove yourself.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're gone.
Right.
So
yeah,
I've heard that's a thing at some places, but
yeah. So
I mean, like big tech's like moniker is like move fast and break things, right? So if anybody's going to do it, like they're going to be the first ones to move in a completely different direction than any other industry.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, it's very Bay Area.
It is
to be sort of this like contrarian person.
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure.
Cool. So maybe let's go back to publish or perish. You were talking earlier about like all these unnecessary pressures that people feel to like get publications out. What did you experience any? I'll take one of those. He's got some beers. Yeah,
we're drinking beer.
Cahaba Brewing Company. Ting.
Yeah, if you want to sponsor us, go for it.
Yeah. So, did you feel that at any point in your academic career, did you feel like it was taking a toll on your mental health because of those pressures? Because I hear lots of these sort of like horror stories of people going into grad school and then they're like, oh, I didn't sleep for 2 days and I'm like taking caffeine pills just to, stay productive. And it's just like, that's not sustainable. And not only that, but it's like detrimental to the people involved.
Yeah, it's really bad for mental health to be doing stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think if I were to say that I didn't feel a lot of pressure in graduate school, I'd be lying. And I think if you ask legitimately any other person that did graduate research, they would be lying too. Like, I think that that's kind of like inherent in the system. I don't necessarily think that the stress makes it unworth it, right? Like, I mean, I've been stressed out of my own job. It's a different stress because I'm getting paid more and I can see the fruits of my labor in a much quicker turnaround time than I can with like doing graduate research.
Right.
But I don't think that it's inherently different. Yeah. I don't think it's that bad.
You don't? Well,
I mean, like you get through it. Like, it sucks for like 3 to or like 2 to like 6 years, depending on like what you're doing.
Right.
But I mean, like at the end of the day, like you get the degree, and hopefully it gets you the job that you want.
Yeah, I think. I think that kind of hints at the problem, though, right? Is that like, so you were talking about like you get paid way more, right? So then the stress is more like justified in that sense, where it's like,
right.
I'm willing to. It's like a simple concept, right? It's like I'm willing to undergo this temporary negative effect for a longer term reward, right?
Yeah.
Versus like, okay, I guess I should say where it's clearly a net positive, right? Does that make sense? Like your negative stress, it's like it's more clear that it's net positive if you're making like $100,000 a year, whereas like if you're getting a PhD and you're getting like fucking 30K, or something,
right?
Oof.
Maybe.
But like, would I be making as much had I not gotten a graduate degree? I don't know.
That is true.
So how long am I willing to make less? I mean, still more than a graduate student. Don't get me wrong. That is like academic slavery. But like, how
academic slavery?
I like that term.
Thank you. Like, wouldn't I want to jump a couple of rungs, like if with a graduate degree? I think it can be worth it. Like the reason why my job is stressful is not because like I'm getting paid more, therefore they can like treat me worse. It's more of like, this is going in front of the C-suite and I don't want my team to look bad. So like, let me do as much work as I can. So like nobody else has to do like backup work if I fuck something up. Like that's where the stress is coming from. Like the CTO is going to look at this.
Right.
So I think that, I don't know. I don't necessarily know that I can compare the two, mainly because I work in completely different industries as well. So I mean, it has its merits. Do I think everybody should go to graduate school? No, absolutely not.
Okay. Yeah. Do you think that too many people are going to graduate school?
Who should be there? Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I think so. I kind of think so too.
Yeah.
Maybe, and I don't mean it in the sense of like they're not qualified.
No.
I mean it of the sense as it's like it's unnecessary, it's unnecessary stress, it's unnecessary time spent.
Right.
It's like all
that,
these...
and a lot of times people aren't genuinely interested in the fields that they're studying, so they're adding nothing to the department,
or they don't want to do research.
Yeah, it's hard to contribute to something that you don't give a flying fuck about.
Right? Yeah. And I would even, and you can feel free to like weigh in on this, Andre. I would even say like to do research takes a very kind of like a specific sort of mentality. At least to be successful in terms of publishing it, really like kind of goes back to what you were saying about all these like incremental papers. And it's almost like government work, where it's like their definition of success is like slowly moving backwards. Not really taking steps. I mean, I'm being like, I'm over exaggerating, but like, these people are putting out like mediocre papers where it's like the results really don't matter.
Yeah. And then I feel like they kind of expect it to get published just because they worked so hard. It's
right.
like, well, you can work hard, but if the quality sucks.
It's like it gets published because it's safe. right? It's like we've got
Exactly.
we've got these papers upon papers upon papers which say the same thing.
Yeah.
And then you publish this one paper that's like the same thing plus 0.01% improvement.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
You know? So I think a lot of people just don't find that rewarding.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I think it takes a certain level of discipline to do graduate research specifically. But like also kind of like a certain level of curiosity to be a graduate student in general. And I don't think that everyone has that. I think that a lot of people are just doing it to stave off adulthood, which is sad.
That's a whole other can of worms.
That's what I was about to say. That's a whole nother thing.
So I've even heard people say like, you know, a large percentage of people who end up in graduate school end up there because they were unemployable as a bachelor's graduate.
Jeez.
And I'm like,
Wow.
that, you know, I mean, I take it as insulting, right? I'm like, it's rude to people who end up going to graduate school because they decided to be there. But then when I sit about it and think about it, I'm like, it's probably true for like a fair number of people, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's
And it also depends on like the job that you're going after, right? Like if that job is saying like you need a graduate degree unless you're coming from like an Ivy or like a top 10 school in your field, then it's hindering. But like maybe you should like think about like a different career goals. But if not, like go for that graduate degree.
Right. So do you think in those cases where like the field is putting those like constraints on people, do you think it's like, God, I don't even know how to phrase it. It's like, I guess in my mind, I'm like, is it worth it? Like, I guess you have to be like really passionate about the field.
Yeah, you must really care about what you're trying to do.
And typically they do.
Which that says a lot about, I think, your passion for like chemistry and chemical engineering, because like I would say chemical engineering is one of those fields where it's like they have all these constraints on getting a job.
Right.
And it's like, it's so hard and so competitive to like get a job at like Exxon, for example.
Yeah.
And yet like, you know, these people, like so many people are like, chemical is like one of the biggest majors at Auburn.
Yeah.
It's like so many people are willing to undergo that to get into this
It's
field.
hard.
So like
engineering's hard.
So maybe let's go on a more positive note, because I feel I don't want to be too negative.
Well, I wanted to ask, so were you shooting for chemical engineering jobs coming out of your master's, or were you just kind of fed up with it?
No, I was shooting for, if not chemical engineering jobs, like technical sales jobs.
Yeah.
So you still needed a graduate degree in most of the places that I was applying to.
Right.
And so this was like the only consulting firm that I applied to, and I liked it more. So I went with it.
Yeah, no.
I've noticed it a lot of times, like, it's just my gut.
There's definitely something to be said for like kind of just liking a company more. Like, even
is that beer hitting you?
Liking
a you stuttered there a little bit. Company. It's a hard word, Dylan. It's 3 syllables.
Very difficult. But yeah, it's definitely something to be said for
sound it out.
Enjoying working somewhere and like enjoying the people that you work with and just the environment of the office. Like sometimes, you know, you get interviewed and you go in somewhere and you're like, I really like the vibe here, you know? Because I've been interviewed at places where I'm like, ugh, you know, like
there's that noise again.
Where I'm like, I don't think I would enjoy working in this place. It's like, because I actually interned. I started as a chemical engineer undergrad. And I did an internship at Alabama Power, and you know, every wall is gray, and like you're standing in the coffee room at 7 a.m. and Billy Bob Joe standing over there talking about his son's baseball tournament over the weekend, and I'm like, somebody shoot me. It's
just not the vibe.
Terrible. It was awful. Everyone there was so nice and educated and like fun to talk to, but the vibe in there was just like dull. And I was like,
just paint the walls, man.
Yeah, I was just add some art or like something, you know, like
just put something.
I'm glad you guys aren't sponsoring Alabama Power.
Oh yeah.
No.
Stick to Cava.
Stick to Cava.
Yeah, look at this great, well-designed can.
Yeah, it's purple.
It's purple.
It's not gray.
Nope. In fact, it's kind of got like a Mardi Gras vibe to it a little bit.
LSU.
Whoa.
Yeah. Sorry.
Back
Go
off
Tigers.
of that one.
Yeah. All right. So, Andre, let's talk about what you do now. Right. So you're a technical consultant. Just like walk me through like what is a day in the life of a technical consultant at Accenture? Maybe talk about like what is Accenture's culture like? What is it about that vibe of Accenture which made you want to stay and the vibe made you want to grow that career, follow that career path?
Yeah. So Accenture is a massive firm. I think it's the highest grossing consulting firm in the US or the world, one of the two. It has like 400,000 employees across the world. It's just a huge entity. In the US, it's just 100,000. But they have like really strong values about like bringing like your authentic self to work. There are a lot of
I saw a little eye roll there.
It's because there are like a lot of key buzzwords that like reading them on paper, it's like a fucking course. Like, what? I'm gonna like check my personality at the door. But then, like,
okay, you say that, but there are definitely companies out there like Alabama Power might even be one of those with their fucking gray walls.
Yep.
Exactly. I mean, like, you just never know by the wall color.
Bring your gray.
All right, that was just one thing.
Bring your most gray self to work.
That was just one thing that I remember that was just depressing about.
I think it's an important
office.
thing, though. It stood out to you.
It did.
All right. So sorry, you were
notable.
saying it's cliche.
It's cliche, but like I don't know any other better words other than those key buzzwords.
100%.
And so it just like. Sometimes a cliche is like the best thing that you can say in that time because it's accurate.
Right.
So I really like Accenture. Like they heavily pride like diversity. I think it's one of the most diverse consulting firms in the US.
Awesome.
I don't know. Because they treasure diversity so much, there's so many different types of people. Like most of the people that I work with are software engineers or were mechanical engineers, like very concrete stuff, but none of us are doing like what we studied. And because everyone's from completely different backgrounds, like everyone approaches the problem differently, right? And it's based on their experience. It's based on like the way that you learn in like university makes you a little bit better at being a project manager and like guiding other people in the best practices to do that.
So does that ever kind of, clash? I'm sure it does. Like with everybody just got a different background. Everybody's like trying to do different things and you're like, okay, well, this isn't working.
Yeah, but it's never disrespectful, right?
No,
right.
As long as you can keep it under the realm of like, respect, then you're good.
Exactly.
But, yeah. It can still be frustrating sometimes.
It reminds me of like it reminds me of Google's old their old motto. It's not their motto anymore, but apparently whenever they first started, Larry and Sergey, their motto was "Don't be evil," which I like. Nice. I love that. It's like
don't be evil.
So simple.
Yep.
But then I think they had some people who were like super politically correct and be like, well, evil is subjective,
Oh my God.
I was literally about to say the same thing.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I mean, like
it is in a sense, but I think, you have to be careful not to fall into like moral subjectivism, right? Because then it's like a lot of things are justifiable.
Yeah.
Under moral subjectivism that I think most people would agree are like objectively wrong.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's like morally. Yeah, exactly. Like, because like, for example, in like, in sort of like these radical, Islamic cultures, morally, it might be okay to like stone your wife in public. And
or throw gay people off roofs.
Or exactly.
And I think that's okay, but
they might think it's. Wait, did you just say you think it's okay?
No, I said they might think that that's okay.
It's
but
like the fuck, like,
very
Dylan.
Obviously wrong.
Yeah, I think everybody would agree.
But like with that being said, I mean, like vaginal mutilation that happens in Africa, like we in the West would think that that's weird, whereas like to them it's becoming a woman. So it's like it's really depends on the culture that you're looking at from. So like,
sure, I think there's.
I'm glad they changed their slogan at least. go Google.
You're glad they changed it from "Don't be evil"?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it probably was the right move. You're probably right.
I mean, you
But
could
I
leave it
do
up
like-
to the reader.
Yeah.
You could leave it up for the reader's interpretation of like.
You think
know,
the shareholders are going to leave it up to the reader? No.
Yeah,
I guess not.
So like,
but I just,
I you
to
know,
me,
like I
you
do
just
have.
kind of hope that like, I'm an optimist.
I'm
so-
willing to acknowledge that, like my straight white male cisgendered Christian upbringing self, "Don't be evil" is like very easy to relate to, but I think for
Right.
people who have been called evil at one point or another in their life for some part of their identity, then I think that would probably be a difficult slogan to swallow.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
And being Google, you probably want to attract like, I don't know, pretty diverse
Everybody.
people.
Yeah, like everybody. Anybody who can get the job done.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Man, we just got into some pretty deep stuff.
No, I love it. I kind of want to follow it.
I do too.
Average
Yeah.
conversation with me.
I think diversity is like an important topic of discussion nowadays, especially with everything that's going on,
Yep.
right? Like with all of the George Floyd stuff,
Yeah.
with the Black Lives Matter movement.
2020's been a big year.
Yeah, and I don't think it's that hard to tie it into science. Like I think I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter and other like pseudo scientific platforms where there's lots of like things like amplifying Black voices in various fields, like in AI,
Right.
for example. There's not very many AI papers published by Black people, and apparently, I don't know if this is true because I don't sit on these panels, but apparently there are a lot of really shady discussions that go on some of these panels of whether to accept a paper or not, purely based off of things like somebody's name. you know?
What?
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, but the same thing happens with like job interviews.
Right.
Like a lot of people, there was a movement to like remove like the race box essentially, so that everything was like race blind. And what they found is that people that were studying like the analytics and the data that was coming back from removing the race box, what they found is that rather than discriminating on race, they were just discriminating on ethnic names. So it's like,
wow,
you can't really control for it. It's inherently ingrained in the culture, and the culture has to change before the practices will change.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's probably another level of sort of obfuscation. That's a big word. Talking about vocabulary. There's probably another.
Oh, you looked at me like.
Well, we were talking about it. I'm not looking at you like, oh wow, this dummy's not gonna get it. But
Yeah.
I'm looking at you because we were talking. Oh, koozie!
Hey!
What are you drinking?
It's La Croix.
Come on!
Wait.
What a letdown!
Hold on. Everybody pronounce. I pronounce it LaCroix.
I think but it's French, right?
Is it?
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's
All right.
he said it right.
All right.
5 years of French in high school.
Yeah.
Oh well, then yeah, you take the reins on that one. Like, that's all you. I don't.
Yeah.
I
What
didn't
I
have a
was-
choice. I did IB. It's fine.
what I was gonna say, I think there's another level of obfuscation where you could even remove names and use something like QR codes, right?
Ooh.
But
Yeah.
I know
I
there's
like
a lot of it's interesting because it's like whatever stance you take, there's pushback, right? So like if I say, oh, let's just all use QR codes on our resumes, then people will be like, but Black people shouldn't have to be ashamed of their identity, and they shouldn't have to hide behind QR codes to get a job. And I agree with that. Like I 100% agree with that
Right.
sentiment.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you want to see quick results, I think that might be the quickest way to do it,
Yeah.
right?
I think that's like a novel like experiment, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it
it'd
would be
You
good.
definitely could try that. I really
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
Good
use
idea.
QR codes instead of names and stuff like that. There was a
It just pisses me off to know that somebody would like look and like see an
So-
ethnic name and go, nah.
I want to get your opinion on this, Andre. So like Ben Shapiro, right? Is like he's a very charged name in
Politically,
politics, especially when it comes to race and gender. He mentioned some study. I haven't done my research and looked up this study, but he mentions some study that any sort of like racial discrimination for names on resumes actually has to do with wealth related discrimination. So basically people are assuming, like, for example, if you have the first name, and this is the name used in the paper. Apparently, also, I'm the messenger passing on the details from Ben Shapiro.
We're not going to kill the messenger. Don't worry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to be like, I don't want it to come across like I'm coming up with this name. Apparently, this name was used in the study, and it's like LaQuisha, I think. If you use the name LaQuisha on a resume, that employers perceive that as being someone who's poor.
Wow.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Yeah, I think Ben Shapiro is trying to get away from the idea of race, right? I mean, because it strengthens his argument that we don't need race advantageous programs. So, like, take affirmative action. I'm sure he would love to get rid of that.
Right.
So, by using the idea that it makes it seem like the employer doesn't want to hire somebody from a lower class, one, fucked up. Two, how can you tell?
Super fucked.
No,
There's
agreed.
really no direct correlation. So, like, he's using this thing that has a stronger correlation, like race and name, and circumventing the race, right? And so,
by saying
like,
it's wealth.
It's
name.
just a workaround.
Exactly. And not only, it's like backup racist, right? Like, you're trying to say that people of color can't have wealth. Like, we have no idea, like, what LaQuisha's parents do.
It's still backhanded. Yeah.
No, I know. That's what I was about to say. I was like, even if that is the case, like, even if employers are assuming, oh, LaQuisha is not wealthy, it's like, well, that's still pretty screwed up.
Yeah, it's still
like, that's so, yeah.
You're still just making, not only that, but you're still making a lot of assumptions. And it's just wrong. Like
that, yeah. So, like, anyway, I think the whole QR thing would be an interesting experiment to run for sure.
But you notice that he's not using the example of, like, somebody named Ashley or somebody named Ingrid. He's using like a name that's really popular in the Black community because he's doing a backhanded, like, oh, don't worry, like, slap for race.
To be fair, if he's being honest, he's pulling the name from the paper, right? So whoever wrote the paper.
So
like I said, if he's being honest,
he just
you know, so we're
referenced
making the assumption he's being honest. But if he is, then he's pulling this name from the paper.
Okay, so he just referenced.
It's not him that's racist.
It might be the paper
researcher.
Maybe
that just has really bad scientific.
Yeah, I don't know where this paper came from.
I don't know why his professor, like, cleared it, to be honest, or her professor.
Yeah, that's true.
Well,
that's true.
The professor was probably also racist. So.
Maybe. Who knows?
It's possible.
Academic apple doesn't fall far from the academic tree.
So I want to push this maybe a little bit further, Andre. Have you experienced personally sort of like racial profiling or sexual preference discrimination or prejudice in your own work life, in academia? Like, maybe let's talk about that a little bit.
Deep topic. I mean, yeah, there's only one instance, and I don't think that the person was trying to be racist, but there's only one instance that I can think of, like, work or academic related, where like race has come up. My professor at Oxford, he's like the Scottish, like, fat, like, backwoods British guy.
I've got a real image in my head.
Yeah, I was about to say, like,
you know, does he wear a kilt?
No, he does not.
Oh, come on.
He wore really, like, short sleeve plaid button downs. Like,
man.
That's even better, maybe.
And I'm saying all of this to, like, build myself up before I say, like, what he said. And he was like, oh, like, you look like Obama. And I was like, that's because that's the only, like, and at the time Obama was president. And I was like, that's the only Black famous person that you can think of that's American. Like, that's clearly racist. I look nothing like Obama. And he said this in the middle of our lab. So, like, multiple people, like, from multiple benches heard it, like, American and British. And literally one of my friends looks at him and goes, I think that's racist. And, like, like, the most posh British accent.
Wow. That's so funny.
That's great.
That moment when somebody has to, like,
stand up,
tell you that you're racist.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And it's
like, hey, bud,
coming from, like, a white British student. But I mean, and I'm sure that there were other chances and other, like, times that I have been discriminated for being Black or because I'm gay. Like, I'm not going to rule that one out. But, like, I don't know about it because I think it's the way that you can be that prejudice and the system that we have. It's so systemic. There's no way that I could be able to point to it one way or another while being definitive.
Right. That is something that's super challenging about the issue, I think. is that like, first of all, I think there's like a lot of, whenever somebody tells their story, right, of their personal experience, I think there's a lot of pushback on like believing that person. And
Absolutely.
especially when it comes to people that are more right leaning, like people, they're quick to point the finger and say, oh, that's anecdotal. And then therefore it's not useful. Right. But it's like at the same time, like I said, it's a dilemma, right? Because like I think ideally everybody wants to like do what's best. Maybe not. Like I think most people want to do the right thing, right? And I think most people like want to believe Black people or people of color whenever they tell their stories. But it's also kind of this really nasty truth that if it is true, we have to admit to ourselves that it's that bad, and a lot of people don't want to believe that.
Right.
Yeah, I think you have to like think of it from their perspective. Like they're living, probably, I don't know this for certain, but they're probably living in an echo chamber, and they probably live in a rather homogenous community. So when somebody presents them with information that completely goes against their own experiences with cops or other people in society, their first inclination is to think that can't be true. Because like legitimately they're being fed information on a daily basis, whether it's Fox News or Breitbart, that confirms all of their own beliefs at that moment. So anything is going to seem kind of like accusatory and aggressive from their perspective, even the truth.
Right. And I think that's one of the big issues is that like people are unwilling to step outside of their own opinion for 1 second, even to look at another news source.
For sure.
So they just read one and they're like, oh, this lines up with what I believe. This lines up with my view. So I'm going to read this and just run down this rabbit hole instead of
or for
looking
people
for another source,
Or for people like, I would even say, I'm willing to admit that like sometimes when people tell stories, it's like hard for me to believe, because it's just like, it sounds too, I know it sounds too bad to be true,
Yeah.
But for people who are particularly like data minded or people who are very like fact minded, I think it's sometimes hard to believe other people's stories. Right. But I think, like that's not like Black people's fault. It's not people of color's fault.
I wouldn't even say like,
it's up to that person to sort of challenge themselves to say like, okay, why do I not believe this? Or why am I having difficulty accepting this?
Yeah. But I also would say that it's not always, it shouldn't always be about the truthfulness of the story. I would say that like, the truthfulness of the story definitely matters. But
it's like the principle of the issue, right? Like if it's true, then that's messed up.
But also how that person feels. Like
exactly.
Like, if that person like felt like they were being oppressed, then either they're just crazy or there was something happening that made them feel that way.
Right.
And you have to address that at least.
Sure.
Exactly. There's a lot of things that you can't put words to.
Right.
Not a lot of interactions you can define every single aspect of that interaction that made you feel uncomfortable. Right. But you walk away with that feeling of uncomfortability. And so just because maybe somebody isn't as articulate as explaining as to why they felt like they were being discriminated against, like that feeling of being discriminated against still resonates with them.
Right.
And so to share that kind of like deep emotion and then be met with like, you're fucking lying.
Disbelief,
like I don't think that
or gaslighting.
That is like it's gaslighting. It doesn't lead to any kind of productivity. It's like, okay, now what, right? Like
I think that's another issue. Is I think so. I would say, and this is just my personal experience. I would say before the whole George Floyd incident happened, I was not like hesitant to have these kinds of conversations with Black people or people of color. But now it's like there is like sort of a timidity there where it's like, okay, I'm hoping that this goes well.
Yeah.
And it comes from a genuine place of like, I don't want to be an ass.
Yeah. I mean, I just kind of want to hope, like, I hope that like the
I
world
want to be a
just-
safe place for Black people to talk to
Right,
about these
exactly,
issues. Is
yeah,
really
like,
what it boils down to.
I want to be able to have this discussion,
right,
and them not feel like I'm not on their side,
right,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I would say like
I'm glad.
funny story. I've like felt discriminated against like one time in my life.
Me too.
It was kind of weird.
Once,
Yeah, it was just once, and
which says something.
says a lot. Yeah. It was just once, and it wasn't a huge deal, and I won't make a big deal out of it. But basically, I was helping like sign people up for like a 5K, right? And it was like early in the morning, and this black lady was coming up to me, and I had smiled and said like, "How are you doing?" Well, next to me was another black lady that was like signing up people as well, and as she was walking up, the person that the lady sitting next to me was helping walked away. And the lady that I was making eye contact with at the moment and like trying to help immediately shifted her attention to the lady next to me and ignored the fact that I had just spoken words to her.
Right.
And I was like, man, that hurt.
Yeah.
I was like, damn.
Yeah.
And I would never want anybody to feel that way.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah.
So like, that was just like, so I hope that from what's happening now in 2020, the world learns.
Yeah.
And gets better.
Deep topics, man.
Yeah. Really deep topics.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like sound like I'm crying about the fact that I was discriminated against this one time.
No, you're not.
She may not even be
and I can hardly say
discriminated,
that that's
you know?
discriminated.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. I would hardly even consider that discrimination. She just probably felt more comfortable
Yeah,
speaking.
that's all
to
it
some-
was.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
I wasn't even upset about it. I was just like, it's just kind of like, damn, that
Right.
hurt.
Yeah, and I think
So
I think, a lot of people who are listening who might be white would probably, especially here in the South, might push back on that and say like, oh, well, Black people should sort of extend the same grace to white people. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but, white people weren't enslaved for a long period of time.
like 4 or 5.
And,
Yeah,
like,
that's like
didn't have
kind
a-
of saying that like, why aren't they happy? Like, why aren't
Yeah.
they grateful?
Right.
Which I think a lot of people would take like issue with.
Yeah, right. So it's like,
Right.
I'm not saying that Black people don't ever have to get to that place. I think eventually that's the place we should shoot for, where everybody's kind of understanding of everyone. But,
Right.
It's got to happen on their time.
Yeah.
I mean, and I
Right.
think that like the way that like society is moving with like interracial couples and having interracial children, it'll get us there much quicker than we actually believe.
I agree.
For sure. And
But I don't think that it should be people of color who have that vision and want to get there, right? I mean, I think it should be
It should be everybody.
white. I mean, but like primarily white people. Like that. Like if society is formed around a certain perception of a person, and that person is being advantaged to it, and they see that advantage, it should be their ownership of being like, no, fuck that, I don't want that advantage, right?
Right.
Which
Right.
will foster more interracial dating and more interracial children that will get us to that point of like nobody really cares about like what your background is because it's so American.
another important issue, or not issue, but important factor to consider that one of my close friends brought up is like, this is really kind of the first generation which has been brought up with the internet, and the internet,
Wasn't that me that said that?
I think it was Connor,
Oh,
Connor Lane. And
okay.
then, well, he was the first one that brought it up to me, but you brought it up to me like directly after, which was really like weird.
Oh, that
It
is
was,
weird.
yeah, we
Interesting.
talked. It was like the day after he told me.
I bring
you
that
told
up
me.
to a lot of people. That's why I was like, what the-
Yeah, this is like the first generation that's been brought up with the internet, and the internet is a really good tool for forcing you to like come into contact with people that you disagree with, right?
Right.
Which is part of why it's such a shit show, and like everybody is like always mad,
disagreeing and
Dude,
mad
it
at
reminds
each other.
me.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a joke, maybe to lighten the mood a little bit. A joke Chris D'Elia told. He was talking about like, dude, like Twitter is nuts now. Like, I'll just tweet something out that I think's harmless. Like, dude, what's up with fashion? Like, it's kind of bullshit. And then someone will tweet back like, fucking die. Like-
Oh my God.
like so angry about like,
That's
something
so
so
funny.
small. But so I think that's really hopeful, right? Because we're probably in a generation where understanding and like, I guess like harmony, not to be too cliche, are at
No, be cliche,
at their-
Andrew.
at,
Do it.
at their highest, right? And I can only I only foresee it getting better. Right.
Same.
Do you disagree?
I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
No, please.
No, we love it.
Please do it.
Do it.
I think we're at a time geopolitically that people are starting to look inward. I think that they are starting to fear the other. If you look from Russia, Putin, to Hungary with Orban, to the US, to Brazil, like I think that the trend towards strongman has made a reassurance, but I don't think that it's too late for us as a collective society to stamp that out. But I think that that's being generated by migration, whether or not it's from Latin America to the US or from the Middle East and Syria to Europe, like because of war-torn areas. Like I think that those cataclysmic events and causing so many people to move and have like a different role in that culture. So take Germany, there's a lot of like neo-Nazi like activism that is kind of against the migration of Syrians to Germany. And I think that that's really problematic, right? I think that it makes the society, if led by the right people, and luckily we haven't seen that to a high extent. I mean, unless you're going to count Turkey, then Erdogan's doing a great job. I think that if the right leader can have the ability of making the general public inch their way towards that leader's side, and if that leader's side is nationalism and authoritarianism, I think that that can be really destructive. So I actually don't see that we're at a great time of harmony, but I like to be proved wrong, so I hope I'm wrong.
So I'm not saying that we're there now, right?
Definitely.
So I'm saying, so what I'm saying in particular is that these are some of the first generations which have been forced to deal with sort of intimately their differences with other people, right? So like, as I can tell you from firsthand experience as a straight white cisgender male that
take a shot every time you say that.
What? What'd you say?
Let's take a shot every time you say that.
We're actually doing we're doing a promo where we're gonna like put out a post where every time someone shares it, or every 10 times someone shares it, we're gonna take a shot on the episode. So we're going to get.
If you want to see us get,
if you want to see us get blacked out on the next episode, then share the
crap out of it.
Yeah, exactly. It'll probably be this episode that we're sharing.
Yeah, we've got to get some really expensive liquor though, because I'm not just going to take shots like that out of some bull crap.
I know. We'll do it. But
Burnett isn't going to cut it for that episode.
No,
absolutely not.
We're not doing like Fireball or something.
No Arista shit, nothing like that. No.
Yeah, but so what I was saying is like, I think it can only get better because, and this is going to sound really dark, but as older generations, which have not been forced to do that, die off.
I've said this.
Yeah, it sounds really dark, but and it's not.
I mean, it's accurate.
It's not all. It's not all older generation people either. There are some very, quote unquote woke older people.
Right.
But by and large,
I just want to say that it shouldn't be dark to be to go ahead and talk about the fact
death is not dark, right? Like
there's
death
nothing
is part
dark
of life.
about death. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
a whole other.
So
topic.
The problem with that thought process is that a lot of people in the past have said the same thing, right? The more we not kill off, but the older generation is no longer with us, the more equitable the society should get, and then look where we are, right? The one thing that we don't have that we can see that like parallel is the internet. Like we don't know how the internet's going to impact that. It may speed things up. Like I mean,
it's a huge experiment, and we don't know the end result. But I would also push back a little bit on what you said, where it's like society should become more equitable, and then look where we're at. I would say society has become a lot more equitable.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Like black people were getting fire hosed in the street and like fucking fed to dogs,
Oof.
like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
50 or 60 years ago.
Some really gnarly
Um,
shit.
No, I mean, like, seriously.
It's just like I would say the difference now is that it
People don't-
seems like a lot worse because you're getting that information like that. And so
Yeah.
like
Well,
what brings in numbers for a media company?
right. Yeah,
just
bad
because
headlines.
it changes
Yeah.
from being violent to being systemic doesn't mean that it's getting
Right.
better.
No, yeah.
I don't.
So I don't necessarily. I think that it's getting better in general. The broad scheme of things, the moral
Right.
arc of history bends towards justice. I
It's a small
think
slope though.
that it's going to be really exciting to see how the internet progresses that arc.
Absolutely.
Right?
No, I agree. I would maybe push back a little bit on like that movement from violent to systemic is not progress. I think it is progress. I'm not saying systemic racism should exist,
Right.
right? It definitely shouldn't.
Definitely shouldn't.
But I think moving from like people being murdered in streets to people not getting jobs because of their race, I
Yeah.
think is
Moving from like
as bad as it
public
sounds.
executions being okay and normalized.
It's
to-
improvement,
yeah.
right?
No, I don't want to make it sound like that systemic racism isn't better than violent racism, right? Like
Right.
I wouldn't want to be born in the past. No,
No, of course not. But
But
wouldn't
do
either.
I think that it embodies the sense of the American spirit in equality? No, not at all.
no,
I think we still have a lot of work to do.
absolutely,
Absolutely.
100%.
I definitely agree.
And
I would say go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I feel like there's a generation of, and it's sad that it should be this way, but I think there's a generation of young white people that are willing to sort of put in that work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
it shouldn't. I guess what I mean to say is it shouldn't be in the hands of white people of whether or not it happens, right?
But it is.
But it kind of is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is.
I mean, if we're being honest, I mean,
It's a sad reality.
And-
I'm
Sorry
willing
for the
to.
pressure.
I'm willing to admit
Yeah.
it, right? Like, I think if you don't admit,
Well, we need to hold each other accountable, like
sure. I think, yeah. And then
as a society.
I think it's like, it kind of goes back to what you were talking about. We were talking about this the other day where like, if your parents are racist, then you have like a higher probability of being a racist yourself, or at least having biases that you're not aware of as
Right.
being raised
Nature
by
versus
some
nurture.
Right, exactly. So it's important that people who have these values of equality and have, this sort of like what you were talking about, this fundamentally American sort of spirit, right? Where it's
Exactly.
like all people should have the freedom and the equality, and they should be able to pursue this sort of like very idealistic life, right?
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's I
Pursuit
think
of
it's very
happiness.
American
Yeah.
to as
Really
much of a
pursue
realist
happiness.
and nihilist as I kind of am. I think that's very American to be very idealistic.
Yeah.
But I think there's I
Well,
think
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just think that we're kind of seeing how like in places where the internet is actually making a difference and holding people accountable. So like for instance, not long ago, some kids that apparently were like admitted to the University of Missouri, I
Mm.
think, posted when the whole George Floyd thing started happening and was like the beginning.
George Floyd.
Bro, shut up. All right, this beer's hitting me. But
Sorry.
but when it started happening, these kids got on like Snapchat or TikTok or something and posted a video of like them like replicating it and thought it was funny. It was like a couple of white kids.
yeah.
And everybody was like, fuck that. So
Yeah.
like everyone shared it, made it go viral, and then the University of Missouri was like, nope, sorry, you can't come to school here anymore.
Yeah.
So like, and that's just like one example of like how I think the internet's gonna make a difference because we can point out stuff like that, see it, hold them accountable, and be like, that's not okay. That's
Right.
not gonna stand.
Yeah. It's almost like in a sense, it's like a public reputation execution.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
it
know,
kind of is.
Where it's like you just like for the rest of your life, you'll be like known as that meme guy who was a racist.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
It's a bad thing to put in your obituary.
yeah.
Oof.
Dang.
Even
John-
after you die,
John
people are
Doe,
like,
1950
Man, fuck that guy.
to 2020, racist. like on your tombstone. Are
Oh
you
my
kidding?
god.
That would suck.
God, yeah.
Man.
That'd be big oof.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
Andre,
it just shows you. Yeah. that actions have consequences. That's all.
They do.
And they should have
They-
some consequences.
That
Shut
beer
up.
is hitting you so
It
hard.
apparently is.
That's so funny.
I don't feel it, but my brain does.
Yeah.
My brain's like, hey man, you need to slow down.
Slow. Andre, it's been so great having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for doing this. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure Dylan did too.
I loved it.
You're
I was willing to like go a step deeper and be like, so what objective, what do you think is actually objectively ethical? Like,
oh gosh,
what kind of things? Like, what kind of things? Where do you draw the line at objective ethicalism?
Let's not do it. Let's wrap it up. Maybe another time. We can have you back.
Yeah.
We'll have him back.
Yeah.
But Andre, I want to say thank you. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad we got to have this talk. I think it's an important conversation.
It was great to meet you, Andre.
Yeah. At the end of every episode, we kind of just give everybody a little, like a couple minutes to talk about something they're passionate about, talk about your life, talk about your work, talk about maybe something, maybe some advice that you want to give, something like that. This is it's your opportunity to get your message out.
Somebody to hear. I mean,
to
only
our
like
followers.
50 people will hear you.
Yeah, our 12 friends and family that listen to our podcast.
Your large gathering in some states.
Exactly.
Yeah,
get it out there. Take your time.
I don't know. Thank you for having me on. Let me first start by saying that this has been a pleasure. It's been nice to talk about science and what's happening in the world. I'm looking forward to COVID ending and getting back into the office and being able to do my normal life. And in the meantime, I'm just going to try to spend as much time outdoors, do a little bit of hiking, some climbing, ride it up. So find your happy spots.
Find your happy spots.
Like
that sounded gross.
Yeah.
That's what she said.
What a good note.
God, that was great. Yep. That was beautiful.
Nice. That's what she said. All right. All right. Thanks, Andre. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
See you, man.
Yeah. Well, Dylan,
Andrew,
we did it.
Yep. Episode 3.
Episode 3. I was about to say the same thing. So if you're
I feel
still,
like we do that a lot at the beginning and the end of an episode. We start both saying the same thing.
yeah, we do. We're in each other's heads. So if you're still listening, we would love your support for this podcast. There's a lot of ways that you can do that. What's one of them, Dylan?
Share our Instagram posts.
You can share our Instagram posts.
God, just share our Instagram posts.
Yeah, follow us on Instagram.
Or you could just go to our website. And we've got our links for Anchor and Patreon so that you can go and donate. Or you could just send us love, man. Just respond to our Instagram stories.
Comment. Send us DMs. And if you want us to go ad free, or if you want us to get better equipment for this podcast, the best way to do that is through donating directly on Anchor or Patreon.
Right.
Our Patreon page is patreon.com/randoscience.
Right.
But other than that, just keep listening. Stay tuned. We've got some exciting things coming out, especially on our Instagram. We got a promo that we're doing that we're pretty excited about.
Yep.
So thank you for listening. We love you. And
this is Rando Science.
This was Rando Science.
Signing off.
Goodbye.